Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We're on episode 6 of Free Dive to the Future, The Mermaid of the Abyss. We have tied this story of the Little Mermaid to Ikuya's character this season, and I think it's pretty fitting. I know I've talked with a lot of you in the comments section on Patreon and on YouTube about this, but I really like that Ikuya is tying to the classic Hans Christian Andersen Little Mermaid story, and a lot of you have commented that it's pretty much that Ikuya has given up. You know, they talked last or 2 episodes ago about sacrifice and what would you sacrifice to get something? What did you gain? What did you leave behind? And for Ikuya, it seems like he gained the ability to be this great swimmer in the individual medley, but what he lost in the process was his friendships, the ability to do the relays, and the things that he seemed to genuinely enjoy about swimming. So the original Little Mermaid story doesn't end well. It ends with Ariel, or the Little Mermaid. She may not have a name, Ariel, in that story, but she ends up turning back into sea foam and dying. And it's kind of given that indication with Ikuya, he keeps collapsing from lack of oxygen, so it's almost like he's collapsing and turning back into sea foam himself. So this preview for this episode showed a lot of Ikuya and Hiyori, and Hiyori has been a very interesting character this season. A lot of you hate him, and I see why. He's a very interesting character, and I've said in the comments I wanted to reserve judgment until after we get this episode, which I'm assuming is the backstory episode. And we're at the halfway point of the season with this. So with this episode, we'll be halfway through season 3, if you can believe it. So I think after this episode, that may help getting his backstory, help me get a better picture of how I personally think of Hiyori. And then, of course, we have the rest of the season to prove whether that's right or wrong, right? But we also got Natsuya talking with Sosuke. I loved the little coin flip at the end, and Sosuke's like, nah, I know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to put my fate in, the charge of a coin or whatnot. And Natsuya's like, good choice. I love that it was commented that Natsuya is a tiger shark. I said in the last episode, or episode 4 or 3, that he was a shark too, so he's a tiger shark. It's established that the only 3 sharks in the series are Rin being the great white, Sosuke being the whale shark, and Natsuya being the tiger shark. I'm all about Samazuka, and I love Rin and Sosuke, and I have a newfound appreciation for Natsuya, so I'm team shark all the way. I pretty much am, sorry. But last episode was great for that. It was great to see Nagisa and Rei, and see Romeo and Shizuru and Ayumu kind of stepping into, Rei and Nagisa kind of stepped into Haru and Mako's shoes, and that was really cool to see. So I'm excited to see them down the road, but as someone who is very curious about Hiyori's character and wants to know more about his ties with Ikuya, I'm pretty excited about this episode. So, as I've done with season 3, I have my bingo card, I have my stamper, and I'm ready to start episode 6, The Mermaid of the Abyss. I'm so excited. So I hope you all are too, but we are going to start episode 6 of Free Dive to the Future here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go. I'm going to go back here for a second, y'all, and let me turn the sound off. We have things to talk about with this episode. Okay. I said I was going to reserve my feelings on Hiyori until after I watched episode 6 because it seemed like this was a flashback episode and an episode about him, but oh my goodness. So, it was noted in the comments, and it was noted on Patreon by Melanie. I believe that was you. Got your name right here. One of the patrons noted this, and I agree 100% now. After watching this episode, I am 100% with you. She labeled Hiyori as toxic Mako. And toxic Mako we are. Yes, I was trying to figure out like some kind of comparison because we've had the parallel of Ikuya and Haru this entire time. There's so many different parallels and connections and webs with these characters and how they relate to one another and how they compare and contrast with one another. And I really like that about Free because you can find ways that characters relate to one another. And so from the introduction of Ikuya, I've always thought of Ikuya as this kind of crossover between Haru and Rin. Like, Ikuya is competitive like Rin, especially in the Ikuya has a lot of comparisons to Rin. Ikuya has been overseas training like Rin, has hit a wall like Rin, has struggled with a relationship with Haru like Rin, and is dealing with some angst like Rin. There's a lot of parallels there, but Ikuya also parallels Haru in a lot of ways. And Ikuya really admires Haru and looks up to Haru and is like, oh, Haru, that time that I, collapsed, Haru saved me. And I really like that. And I like that about him, that he just came in to save me, and then he quit swimming, and so I feel like I was betrayed and let down. And so I wondered how Hiyori fit into all this. And when Melanie said that he was toxic Mako, I was like, oh, yeah. Because Hiyori, very much like Mako, has been there to support Ikuya, just like Mako is there to support Haru. But the way that they go about it and their own personal... And here's the thing. Hiyori and Mako are very, very different characters. Very different people in this show. And their environments that they were brought up in are very, very different. Similar in interesting ways, but very different. But so the role that Hiyori plays in terms of Ikuya is similar to the role that Mako plays with Haru, but the ways that they go about things and their ideologies and motivations are totally different. And I find that so fascinating, because it could be easy to say, oh, they're just carbon copies of each other. One's just good and one is bad. But that's not the case. I don't think Hiyori is a terrible person, necessarily. He's a jerk. But I get why he's doing the things that he's doing. I don't agree with them. And I think that he's not going about this the right way. And he's really misguided on a lot of his decisions. And we're going to talk about that. But I think that Hiyori is trying to come from a good place. He thinks that he's coming from a good place. But he's kind of not. So we need to talk about that. So I love that in the Little Mermaid scenario, with the story of the Little Mermaid, both Hiyori and Ikuya think that they're the Little Mermaid. They both think that they're the Little Mermaid. And here's the problem. And that's fine and dandy that they both think that they're the Little Mermaid in the story, that they're comparing themselves to that mermaid. In Ikuya's case, Ikuya sacrificed... Ikuya is more of the sacrificing of the voice to gain the legs. Ikuya is more like the process in terms of that story. So Ikuya is like, I sacrificed my friends and relays to get good individual medley, but it's cost me my heart. My heart in this isn't there anymore. With Hiyori, it's not the process, it's the why. Because in The Little Mermaid, I'm going to look at the Disney version, in The Little Mermaid and in the Hans Christian Andersen version too, the how was the process of becoming the human, sacrificing the voice to gain the legs. The why was because the Little Mermaid wanted to be with her prince. That was the why. Ikuya in The Little Mermaid is the representation of the process, wanting to become good at swimming to get closer to the prince, which in his mind is Haru, and he represents the process. Hiyori is solely the why. Hiyori has thought in his head this whole time that Hiyori views Ikuya as the prince, and Hiyori's like, I'm the Little Mermaid, and I've been doing all of this to be by your side, and it's not being reciprocated. And the problem with all this is that Ikuya kind of is viewing Haru as the prince, and Hiyori is viewing Ikuya as the prince. So it's not even a love triangle. It's like a linear love. Like it's just going from point A to point B to point C. But the points aren't intersecting and they're not coming back around. It's just a linear line. And nothing is getting reciprocated, right? That's the problem. And that's why everybody's unhappy. But yeah, so that is so intriguing to me. We get this flashback of Hiyori as a kid, and here's where him and Mako are distinctly different, because here's another cool parallel. We had a previous episode, way back in episode 8, we had a shot of Haru and Mako at the playground playing in the sandbox as kids together and on the slide together. Again, we're tying the parallels of Mako, Haru, and Hiyori and Ikuya together. So we've had Mako and Haru in their flashback as kids. Mako was with Haru from the start as friends, And so, unlike Hiyori here, Mako always had Haru as like a base, and they have a very equal relationship with one another. But we see Hiyori here, and none of the kids, he's too shy. He can't respond to the kids, and he doesn't seem to relate to any of them, so none of them want to play with him. And then it shows all the parents coming around being like, oh, Hiyori, you're by yourself. Your parents both work, don't they? Oh, look at you waiting for them by yourself. What a grown-up kid. And it shows all the kids with their parents leaving the playground and leaving Hiyori by himself. And that is a big difference from Mako, because we've established over the last 2.5 seasons, Mako has a very good home life. Mako has a great family relationship. His parents, his twin siblings, like they all have a wonderful relationship with each other, and they're part of a loving environment. And you can tell that that loving home life has shaped Mako to be a caring person. Like Mako is naturally kind of the big brother of Iwatobi. He was kind of like the parental figure of the team in season 1 because he had that molding of his family to go off of. Whereas Hiyori here, Hiyori's clearly seems like the only child, and his parents are absent. And they did the metaphor of showing him in the dark room with only the outside light coming in on him, and it's his parents. And Hiyori can't vocalize how upset he is. He just puts on a smile and he's like, no, everything's fine. Like he only knows how to do this facade. Like he's like clenching the glass and clenching his pants. And he's like, I always wore a smile despite everything else. And even his room is kind of barren too. Like he's just by himself, and he says that that's okay. I'm fine being by myself, but he clearly is not fine with it. And he draws his family with him, and then reads The Little Mermaid. And then he meets Ikuya, right? He finds swimming as an outlet to get rid of all his frustration. He finds swimming as a way to make him forget about being alone. And he says, when I was in the water, I could feel who I really was in a way I couldn't elsewhere. So likening himself to the Little Mermaid. And then he meets the prince, which to him is Ikuya, which when we get to this bingo card in a minute, I got one to check off. But it's such fate. And you could see the wheels turning in Hiyori's head when they meet up again. He's like, this is fate. I met you in elementary school. We are both from Iwatobi. We met each other and we hit it off and it was great. And then what are the odds that in some random town in America, years later, I meet you again? I meet you again in America, and we both recognize each other. Like, what are the odds? You could instantly see how, a kid could get kind of delusioned and being like, man, this does seem kind of like, what are the odds? It's such a coincidence. I love in the drawing, too, that Hiyori does, that Hiyori clearly makes Ikuya the prince because it's got the blue hair, the bluish green hair, and makes him the Little Mermaid. Like, it's like, oh! And then when they have that conversation and he's like, I'm afraid of turning into sea foam, it ties to why Hiyori is so hesitant to let Ikuya get back with his friends, because he's like, I don't want to lose you. And all these kids on the playground as a kid, they all just left me alone. Hiyori's like, I'm so used to being alone, and then I found you, that if I lose you, what do I have? I'll just disappear and turn back into foam. And he's like, and I hate that part of the story. So the why Hiyori is the way he is makes a lot of sense. And I will play devil's advocate. I will play devil's advocate a little bit here, because and part of it is Hiyori's fault. Part of this is Hiyori's fault, because Hiyori doesn't vocalize that he doesn't like being relied upon. Because here's the thing, he said, I want to be friends with adults. And I wanted to be, you could tell that Hiyori is one of these characters and one of these people that wants people to rely upon him. And I talked about that in some previous episodes back. And Natsuya seems very reliant upon upon Hiyori. He's like, Hiyori, are you checking on him? How's his time doing? What do you think? And I'll play devil's advocate. Natsuya maybe shouldn't rely on Hiyori so much. Maybe Natsuya should check in with, and I know Natsuya said that he tried to get a hold of Ikuya and he wouldn't answer his phone. I totally get that. But I feel like Natsuya, as much as he travels and as much as he's gone on these trips, maybe Natsuya should fly into Japan a few times, and like where he was at, he was helping Samazuka out with their training camp. Why didn't Natsuya go see his brother? I love Natsuya as a character. I really do. But I'm going to play devil's advocate for Hiyori here for this one part. I'm like, why didn't he go visit Ikuya and check in on him while he was in Japan? Why isn't he doing that? He's relying on Hiyori, and I'm sure Hiyori wants to be relied upon, but I do think that that's putting a little bit of that makes Hiyori worse, because Hiyori's like, okay, Natsuya's relying on me to do this. I want to help Ikuya and be there for him. So I've got all this pressure on me. Now, do I think that excuses Hiyori's actions? No, absolutely not. We'll talk about the end of the episode here, but I understand where his character is coming from in terms of why he's doing the things that he's doing. I don't like it. I think that Hiyori is not going about this the right way at all, and we'll get to that, because it's clearly his actions are not affecting. And there's a little bit on Ikuya too, because those guys asked Ikuya to go karaokeing, and Ikuya said no. And I'm sure you can make the argument that, well, Hiyori would have stepped in and said no too, but that does put a little bit on Ikuya as well. Like, Ikuya could say yes and take the initiative too. He's not, and he's being psychologically manipulated. I get that. It's complicated. This whole scenario with Hiyori and Ikuya is very, very complicated. And I'm trying to think out loud and work through this with y'all. But the part here where the coach was like, so he's been working on his free stroke too. So I'm wondering if he's going to try to challenge Haru too. And he kind of leaves and is like, oh, I need to think about things. Bye, Kay. And here's the thing that sucks. And I do feel a little bit sad for Hiyori in this part, is that Ikuya telling him, he's like, yeah, Haru saved me back then. And you could tell he like wasn't fully collapsed. And he's like, Haru helped save me, and I'm so grateful that he did. And then when he tells Hiyori again, he's like, I pushed myself too hard in practice, and I sank through the water alone, I thought. Haru's really gone. This is the sad part, y'all. Because for a second I was like, wait, was Hiyori our unreliable narrator, and has Hiyori not been there the whole time? But the problem is, Hiyori was there. Hiyori gave him the books, and Ikuya's like, oh, I'm not that much of a reader, but thanks. If you had the Little Mermaid, I really take it. Don't think it's too girly. But Ikuya is so hyper-focused on Haru and their promise that he totally forgot that Ikuya helped him. And he forgot that Ikuya was even there during his, like, in the flashback at the hospital and in the pool. He doesn't even see Hiyori. And that is kind of sad, because that kind of helps explain why Hiyori is so desperate to get Ikuya to notice him and to keep him around, because Ikuya is not recognizing Hiyori. And so that's problematic. And so I think that feeds into Hiyori even more. But here's the central problem, Hiyori. Hiyori needs to work together with Haru and Mako and Asahi. Ikuya needs a support system. Ikuya clearly has some issues, some major issues, not just health-wise with the whole oxygen deprivation. That's not it alone. Ikuya has some major, like, psychological issues that he needs a support system for. And if I were Hiyori in this situation, I would think, okay, I want to be there. I like that Hiyori's like, what can I do for Ikuya? And the sad part is, us, the audience, know what he needs to do. We're like, no, look, you need to get Haru and the others to help. You need to have them come over, and y'all need to sit around kumbaya style and hold hands, have a seance. I don't care what you have to do, but rid the demons from Ikuya. But you need to get together and communicate with him. And so what we as the audience want to tell Hiyori is like, look, you need to talk, you need to sit down and talk with Mako, Haru, and Asahi, and tell them what all has been going on. Tell them what Ikuya's been saying, and let Haru and Ikuya have a heart-to-heart. That's what needs to happen. They need to have a heart-to-heart and talk about these things. Because Ikuya is going to keep hyper-focusing on this promise and the stuff he's missing out on with Haru that he has been expecting to happen. And it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. Like, everything's not improving. It's not because, I think Hiyori believes that things are going downhill because he's not trying hard enough. Hiyori's like, if I keep trying harder, if I keep helping Ikuya even more by myself, he'll get better. If I keep encouraging, it's toxic Mako. He's like, if I just keep doing everything by myself, then everything will get better. But it's not working. And so this is why I really like the toxic Mako comparison, because this same situation happened in season 2 with Haru, where Haru didn't know what he wanted to do in the future. He was getting in a slump. Things were getting worse. And Mako tried to reason with him. Mako tried to have the heart-to-heart just like Hiyori did at the end of this episode. And it didn't end well for Mako then, just like it didn't end well for Hiyori here. But here's the crutch. Mako, realizing that what he was telling Haru wasn't getting through, that Haru was getting worse, and that nothing was working, even when they brought in Rei and Nagisa to help, just like what we've done with Mako and Asahi here, it still wasn't working. So, what did Mako do? He called Rin. And he's like, look, I know Haru and you have had a past. I know that Haru is bent out of shape because of stuff that's involved you in the past. So I'm calling you to get Haru out of his funk because I know you can do it. And that's exactly what happened. Rin took Haru to Australia. We had episode 12. It was great. And then Haru came back with a fresh perspective and was so much healthier. And still, Haru was able to mend that relationship with Mako, and they became better friends for it. It helped make their relationship stronger while Haru could still be friends with Rin and made their relationship stronger. So, Hiyori, if Hiyori would just do what Mako did, then I think it would solve all this problem. If Hiyori was just like, okay, look, you need to talk to Haru. Haru's the one that's going to help you get out of this funk because you guys clearly have something in the past you haven't resolved yet. Just go do this thing and you'll be fine. That's what needs to happen. But because it's Hiyori, it's not happening. And he's just trying to do the opposite and being like, well, you just don't need to even see Haru. If you don't see Haru, it'll be fine. You won't have to worry about anything. And it's like, imagine if at the end of episode 11 in season 2, if Mako was like, well, don't go see Rin. Don't talk to Rin anymore because he's just going to make you feel worse. Could you imagine? Nope. It wouldn't have worked, right? He needed to go off on that excursion with Rin to make himself better. And Ikuya needs an excursion with Haru. Ikuya just needs some time alone with Haru for them to talk things out, for them to set the record straight. And then I think that Ikuya would come back to Hiyori and, say, hey, I'm sorry for whatever's been between us, but let's still be friends. But here's my other friends too. Let's all be friends. I don't think Hiyori can realize that. Hiyori's so convinced that he has to solve all these problems on his own that it's causing more harm than good. Oh, the toxic Mako label, I absolutely love it. I mean, after this episode, that's exactly my thoughts. And man, let's talk about also, I'm looking back at this episode, Natsuya in his teenage wardrobe. Dude, fashionable as hell. But yeah, I just... So, in the midst of all this going on with Hiyori, we get Now coming in and talking with Mako and meeting up with the others. And here's why I think there's gonna be some convergence in the next couple episodes, because it seemed like Mako and Asi and Haru hit a standstill. They're like, we can't get around Hiyori. Hiyori's not letting us near Ikuya. I guess we'll just have to give up. What can we do? And then insert Now, who I love that Now is becoming a trainer and Mako is becoming a teacher. Like, they're very similar characters, but I just love the idea of Now becoming a trainer for swimmers. Like, I just want to see him travel the world with Natsuya. Is that wrong? Can I do that? Can we have that? Why not? But, oh my gosh. So, this is where the convergence is going to happen, because Now has figured out that Hiyori is what's causing all of this stagnation in the plot. And Now's like, well, I'll just talk to Natsuya. So, when that happens, Natsuya is probably going to talk to Hiyori, and he's probably going to talk to Ikuya, and that's going to cause everything to blow up. So it's like the free angst bomb. Now is holding it like a grenade, and Now's like, it's fine. So I'm just waiting for Now to rip the trigger and make the grenade go off, because it's clearly going to happen the next couple episodes. It's clearly going to happen. And That's going to be interesting. But I love this episode, how Hiyori's words were hurtful. They hurt Haru. Clearly they affected him. And I love that Asahi stepped up and was like, that's not true, Haru. Because Haru's like, oh, well, Hiyori says that everybody I swim with suffers. And Asahi's like, that's not true. You swam with me and Mako and we're fine. And so I love that. I love that our friends here are friends. They're building each other up instead of breaking others down. And I wish Hiyori would just take a page out of that book. Hiyori is so insecure and Hiyori is so worried about losing Ikuya as a friend that he's being selfish and he's hogging Ikuya to himself, and it's suffocating him. He was talking about he couldn't see the stars anymore. And of course there's that joke where it's light pollution. Of course you can't see them. But it's like Ikuya's lost sight of what he wants and his future, and Hiyori's just making it worse. And it's like, dude, you need to maybe work on this a little bit. And oh god. So we have Ryuji, which Ryu means dragon, which I really like. So Ryuji is our mysterious weird guy that has a food blog. And I wanted to go back and see what that food blog said. I said, I have a blog, and it says, handed over the meal ticket. It took less than a minute. Tanuki soba is here. I was instantly captivated. The golden tag team of bonito and seaweed intertwining in my tongue. Oh my god. Such a poet. Oh my god. So what a weirdo. I love that Ryuji and Mihail are like such oddities. They're like such odd guys. They both like, Mihail's obsessed with muscles and Ryuji is obsessed with food because he has his blog. But yeah, they are clearly Haru and Rin parallels, which I find funny. And Haru's just like, when he has his hand on his shoulder and Haru's like, what are you doing? I love it. So I'm so curious about their dynamic, Mihail and Ryuji. And I love that we get a flashback of them swimming freestyle against one another, which is interesting. And so I'm wondering why he wants Haru to focus on other styles other than free. I'm wondering why that is. And of course, as per 6 Degrees of Kasumi, Asahi's brother-in-law comes in and he's like, oh, I know that guy. I'm a sports writer. I've wrote on him. Ryuji-san. It's like, And Ryuji looks really tall. So I'm so curious. And then, of course, we cut to Mihail being like, I'm talking about muscles. And Rin's just like zoned out in another world. He's like, I've listened to my sister talk about this for like 15 years. Like, dude, I've learned how to zone out muscle conversations. Like, Mihail and Ryuji are so extra in their own ways that I'm like, dude, what? I also like that Mihail just randomly showed the swim guys video footage of him swimming as a young adult. It's like, oh, bud. But I also like that Mihail comments that what spurned him on was Ryuji, was his competitor. Like, they spurned each other to swim better. So it's very much Rin and Haru. Like, each of them make each other more competitive. And, but he says Ryuji was a promising swimmer that was going to compete on a global level, but suddenly quit swimming competitively. So the question is why? Why did he quit swimming competitively? I guess we shall see. And so now he just like collects swimmers and they call him Pilot on Ryuji. So it seems kind of the opposite of Mihail, because Mihail seems like he just picks certain swimmers out. Like he turned down Natsuya, and so he's like, no, not you. I want someone else. So it seems like Mihail is very particular about his swimmers, whereas Ryuji just is like, everybody come swim with me. And so it's like, I'm curious to see more of their dynamic. Also, rewatching this phone conversation between Natsuya and Hiyori, I really like the detail of Natsuya. We get the close-up of his eye, and it's the exact same eye as Ikuya. I really like that. So, and it seems like sports nutrition. So we have sports nutrition is what, I think it was Natsuya that had the sports nutrition thing. So I'm curious. We know that Now is studying sports medicine. So why does Natsuya have those books specifically, unless he's going to send them to Now, maybe? And so, forgetting what's going on around him is what Natsuya says. And yeah, Ikuya gets so hyper-focused that he forgets everything else around him, which is kind of a flaw because Ikuya, he, didn't notice that Hiyori helped him back then. He was so hyper-focused on Haru. And when Natsuya says, I don't want him to go through that incident again, it's like, well, he kind of is still going through that incident now. So we haven't really solved any problems. And then we cut back to Haru and Mako and this kid that Mako's helping to coach. And Haru's like, I have been thinking about, why I only swim free. And he's like, I just can't find the answer. I don't know what to do. And then this kid is just like, well, swim something else for a while. Just do it. And Haru's like, this profound child, this prodigy. And it's like, the kid's like, was I wrong? Did I just try something else for a while? So will Haru try a different stroke? I would be interested in that. Haru, you'd fit in the butterfly club real easy, if you just want to try that. Although I don't know if Haru has the shoulders for the butterfly. I don't know. Haru's a little bit more slender, so I'm like, could he do the breaststroke perhaps? That would be kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. And then it shows, I'm assuming Ryuji shows up with the sports writer. And then we cut to this scene on the slide. And yeah, so I've tried to play devil's advocate for Hiyori in this episode because I see his motivations. I do feel sad that he wants to be, he views Ikuya as his only friend, which is sad, and it's kind of his own fault, but, he can't help it, that's his only friend. And for Ikuya not to recognize him is sad. But at the end of the day, dude, you can't keep Ikuya to yourself. And that's not going to work. So he, our heart-to-heart confession under the trees, have we upgraded to playground? Because that slide scene was a bit sick. I really like what the show did in this scene, though, in terms of the power between Ikuya and Hiyori. Who has the power in the situation? Because at first, it starts out that Ikuya is above Hiyori on the slide. Like, he's looking up, and Hiyori is, like, below him. And it's kind of sad. Hiyori's like, you can compete globally. You're doubting yourself. You're stronger than this. Why are you, like, look how high up you are. Like, it's a nice symbolism. Like, Hiyori looking up to Ikuya on the slide is a really cool symbolic move there because it shows that Hiyori looks up to Ikuya. He puts Ikuya on a pedestal and he's like, you're such a good swimmer. Why are you doubting yourself? Like, you're so good. You can compete globally. Quit doubting yourself. Like, he puts Ikuya up there on the pedestal and Ikuya is just like, no, I don't get it. What about Haru? And then I like that, just like Hiyori does have a moment where he's like, Haru, he's like, don't rely on stars and wishes. He's like, you can make your dreams happen if you just, do it. And Haru said something very similar, back in that first couple episodes. And then Ikuya tries to make the Little Mermaid comparison, and Hiyori is like, you're not the Little Mermaid, I'm the Little Mermaid. Like, you're the prince, don't you see? And they're both right. They can both think of themselves as the Little Mermaid in this scenario. But I love the symbolic power change here is that I can't be strong like Haru. Ikuya says that. And Hiyori, that's the final straw. He's like, quit comparing yourself to Haru. Quit it. And he drags Ikuya down the slide. And I love that power dynamic changes for a moment where Ikuya is under him. And Hiyori has this very dominating pose. Like, he's just straddling him. And he's like, look, you say you're not strong, but you are. Forget about Haru, because I can't stand to see you suffering any longer because of him. And it's not that Haru is making him suffer, it's the fact that they haven't been able to communicate that's making him suffer. And it's the ironic thing is it's Hiyori's fault that this is happening. If Hiyori would just let him talk to Haru, things would get better. And what does he say there? He's like, you could aim for the global level. And he's like, I know you can do it. You can become a new you. he says, if that'll bring you happiness. And it's kind of like the struggle that Haru had. Haru's like, it's not just something new isn't going to change things. And Ikuya's like, you don't get it. And he's like, nah, nah, nah. And I really like that that's when the power changes a third time. So we started out with Ikuya at the top of the slide and Hiyori looking up to him. And then Hiyori brings him down to his level. And Hiyori is superior to him, standing over him. And then Ikuya shoves him off. And since Ikuya is standing on top of the slide, it makes him taller than Hiyori. So the power shifts back to Ikuya in that moment. And Hiyori's like, well, you're not like the normal you. Ever since you saw Haru, you've been different. You should just forget about him. And it's like, no, that's not solving the problem. And so Ikuya and Hiyori are at an impasse. And Ikuya's like, you don't know what's best for me. Leave me alone. And Hiyori gets really, hurt by that. But it's like, Hiyori, you're doing this to yourself. You're making Ikuya feel worse because of you're being selfish and because he's not putting Ikuya's needs above his own. He's being selfish. Hiyori is being selfish. And Hiyori is thinking, if I don't do this, then he's like, if I don't do this thing and if I don't keep Haru from him, then things are just going to get worse. And it's like, dude, if you just were selfless for a minute and thought of Ikuya, you'd see that he needs to talk to Haru. And you'd help him by letting him talk to Haru. But since you're not, things aren't getting better. So, and then we cut to the last scene of this, which is Ryuji in his sandal flip-flops looking over at Haru swimming in his trench. And he gets this, like, wickedy smile on his face where he's like, yes, I can do things with this. And it's like, what are you planning, sir? Oh my gosh. This was a good episode. This is a very much needed episode, especially for Hiyori's character. So, my thoughts on Hiyori. Hiyori is being selfish. Hiyori is being selfish, and he is being a toxic Mako. He just needs to embrace the Nakama and just let Ikuya embrace it as well, and then they'd all be fine. I really do. I really find the parallels between Mako and Hiyori, especially since they've raced, to be very interesting. And I think the Hiyori is just, he's self-harming. He's harming himself. And if he would just, be a little more selfless and let Ikuya talk with Haru, then things would be solved. But this is why we can't have nice things. This is why we're going to have this angst lead through the rest of the season. So we're at the halfway point. We've clearly established our dilemma here with Hiyori and Ikuya and Haru and the others. I'm very curious how that's going to get resolved. I have a feeling, just a wee bit feeling, it sounded from the phone conversation that Natsuya had with Hiyori that now hadn't talked to him yet. But I really am hoping that next episode or the episode after that now talks to him and relays this information, because I have a feeling it's going to be Natsuya that confronts Hiyori more than anybody, because Natsuya and Hiyori have the most connection with Ikuya, one being the brother and Hiyori being the self-proclaimed best friend. So I have a feeling that Natsuya is going to get onto Hiyori, and that's going to make things worse, but it may be one of those situations where it needs to get worse before it gets better. I don't know. But yeah, those of you that hate Hiyori, I get it. I don't hate Hiyori. I get where he's coming from. And I feel sorry for Hiyori. I feel sorry for him. Not because, it's like, oh, poor Hiyori, woe is him. Not that kind of sorry, but it's pitiful. It's pitiful because we, the audience, we can see what Hiyori needs to do to solve the problem, but Hiyori can't see what he needs to do. That's what's sad, is that Hiyori is blinded and he can't see himself what needs to happen. So I don't want things to blow up in Hiyori. I want Hiyori to realize the power of Nakama. But how that's going to happen, I don't know. But to get to this bingo card here, I did see one for sure. and it's in the past, but I'm going to count it anyway, and that's Ikuya has a genuine smile. Because we saw a genuine smile in this episode from him as a kid, and him, at first when we just saw the first flashback of him in elementary school smiling, I was like, I'm not going to count that. But then when we saw it again in middle school, I was like, I'll count it. So, as you can see, I am so close to a bingo, but yet so far. Unless Ren and Haru tie, Kasumi gets handsy, we get some biting puns, and we have heart-to-heart under the trees, it's going to be a while for a bingo. I really thought at this point, especially after the first episode, that we'd get a lot more of these, but we've not yet. Which is kind of good, because these are mostly tropes and stereotypical things to expect from Free. And the fact that we have had a lot, but we still haven't gotten all of them, I think that's a good thing. So yeah, I'm curious to know your thoughts on Hiyori. I see the Hiyori hate. I see the Hiyori apologists. I see the spectrum. And this is the fun thing about this character is that he's complicated. Not that he's complex, but that his whole circumstance and motivations are complicated. And I find that fascinating. So, with that being said, this has gone on quite some time, but I'm curious to know your thoughts. I'm sure I'll have more to add for episode 7, but this episode was great, guys. I'm very pleased with how it's gone. So, in any case, I hope you all enjoyed the reaction. I hope you have a wonderful week. Stay safe, take care, and I'll be back next week with episode 7 of Free Dive to the Future. Bye.